Hi, Gary DeWall here, and this is another Bridging the Week for the week August 5th through 9th, and today is August 12th, 2013. Good morning, and I hope at least some of you are watching this from a beach or mountain somewhere, preferably wearing flip-flops or even barefoot. We may be in the dog days here in New York City, but there was still a lot of interesting developments relevant to the financial services industry globally last week. The first matter, though, was not a regulatory or even a private litigation matter at all, but the publication last Wednesday of a very interesting and, to me, important thought piece by the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation entitled Beyond the Horizon. In it, DTCC discusses various systemic risks that increasingly impact the financial services industry one way or another. These principal risks are the rise in the number of the risk of cyber attacks, the speed of certain high-frequency trades relative to industry risk infrastructures, the concentrated nature of key clearance and settlement functions within just a few firms and central clearing counterparties, and regulatory safeguards that are years from implementation or potentially introduce new forms of risk because of their sheer scope and complexity. Although these are the principal risks highlighted, DTCC discusses many other important risks too, including interconnected risk, liquidity risk, collateral risk, and more. Reading about all these risks make me wonder whether DTCC might have missed the biggest risk of all, which is the ability, or frankly and sadly, the inability of industry participants to generate sufficient net income to actually pay to safeguard against all these other increasing risks. That being said, DTCC's report is very thoughtful and deserves to be among the many books and magazines we all intend to read by summer's end. The discussion regarding cybersecurity is particularly chilling, by the way. Watch for my detailed discussion of DTCC's report in early September to be posted on this website. You remember, by the way, a few weeks ago, when I reported here on a National Futures Association action against the Chief Compliance Officer of a Futures Commission merchant? Well, last week, the UK Financial Conduct Authority republicized the FSA's July 2012 fine of Great British pound 70,258 of a senior UK-based compliance officer, David Thomas Davis, of the broker Paul E. Schrader, Miller & Co., and the revocation of Mr. Davis's qualification to serve as an approved person for compliance and money laundering reporting oversight. According to the FCA, Mr. Davis failed to act with due care when he ignored certain red flags and permitted a client of Schrader Miller to enter certain trades on the London Stock Exchange during October 2010 that constituted manipulation of the relevant security. FCA claimed that not only did Mr. Davis have sufficient information prior to approving the trades to question the legitimacy, but afterwards he became aware of additional information that should have prompted him to report the trades as suspicious transactions, but he did not. Again, this matter should serve as just another reminder to senior compliance officers worldwide that the bar is rising regarding regulators' expectations as to the level of their performance. Last week, the Australian Securities and Investment Commission also reported a very interesting matter that points out that firms will receive no credit for investing in fancy compliance monitoring system with all sorts of nice bells and whistles if they don't actually do anything with the warnings such systems generate. In this matter, Instanet Australia was fined Aussie dollars 130,000 for permitting a client to place orders through a co-location automated order processing system that ultimately resulted in a number of wash sales being executed in various securities traded on the Australian Stock Exchange. Instanet's AOP system had a number of standard credit type filters, but it had no wash trade filter. ASIC said it should have had a wash trade filter. Moreover, during the relevant time, Instanet Australia used a well-known industry compliance monitoring tool developed by the Smarts Group that actually identified the relevant trades as trades for which there was no change in beneficial ownership. However, according to ASIC, Instanet Australia never entered these transactions into its compliance register or acted on them, let alone cancel the relevant trades. This case provides an important message to firms that is not sufficient solely to spend big bucks in compliance monitoring systems, but it is equally and perhaps more important to have policy and procedures to process exceptions reported by such systems and qualified staff to implement such policy and procedures. This matter also makes me think of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange guidance on wash sales that is currently being considered by the CFTC and the CME self-match prevention functionality on Globex. I've got some articles on this on my website. Check them out. And finally, a few other matters. Last week, the United States Securities and Exchange Commission determined not to commence an enforcement action against the Eurex exchange, which is headquartered in Germany, when it turned out that its futures contract, based on the Euro Stoxx Banks Index, approved by the United States Commodity Futures Trading Commission as a broad-based stock index futures contract in 2002, had evolved by August 2010 into a narrow-based security index futures contract requiring approval by the SEC. Needless to say, at the time, Eurex did not seek or obtain SEC approval and did not realize its oversight until September 2011 after the CFTC adopted new procedures and requested Eurex to certify that it remained in compliance with its broad-based stock futures contracts requirements. By the way, what do they say? It's not news if a dog bites a person, but it is news if a person bites a dog. Well, seriously, this matter raises the importance for exchanges, broker-dealers, future commission merchants, and swap dealers carefully to consider the characteristics of derivatives based on stock indices to determine whether they are subject to CFTC or SEC oversight, or both. Also, there can be sometimes not quite a few complications because of the way U.S. regulators classify financial instruments as futures or securities, while other regulators outside the U.S. distinguish between financial instruments and commodities. On August 5th, the European Securities and Market Authority, or ESMA, issued revised questions and answers related to EMIR. There are a whole bunch of new Q&As related to central clearing and transaction reporting, and they're important to be checked out. Check out this revision on my website. Finally, also on August 5th, FINRA fined Oppenheimer & Company US dollars 1.4 million related to the sale of unregistered penny stocks, but more significantly, for various anti-money laundering violations too. FINRA claimed that Oppenheimer did not monitor patterns of suspicious activity that constituted red flags of AML violations. Among the red flags ignored, said FINRA, was a stranger appearing at a branch office carrying certificates for penny stocks, constituting a large percentage of the float for that issue. Now, I know it sounds easy for regulators that firms should monitor red flags, even when after the fact it sounds so blatant, but it really is harder than it sounds. That being said, firms should consider, in fact must consider, developing or buying systems where all quasi-suspicious or problematic conduct can be aggregated in one location and reviewed by customer, type of conduct, or other searchable criteria. Oh, one last thing if you get a chance, and this is actually just very, very interesting. Check out a consultation being conducted by the Ontario Securities Commission as to disclosures that might be appropriate regarding gender diversity at publicly traded companies. It turns out in Canada in 2011, only 10.3% of all directors of public companies were women, and 43% of all companies on the S&P TSX Composite Index did not have a single female board member, while only 50% of senior office positions were women, with 35.9% of public companies having no women senior officers. Wow. I wonder what these statistics would be in other countries of the world, but I bet you they wouldn't be much better. Well, that's about all I have for now. Until next week, this is Bridging the Week, and this is Gary DeWaal. Have a great week.